Microsoft is delighted to be at PyCon. Hope you are enjoying the sessions. Scan the QR code to join the Microsoft developer community and receive regular updates on many open source topics, including Python.
Oh, hello. Are we ready? Yep, we're ready. So, welcome. Oh, actually, the mistake corrected. Ahoy, mateys. This is talk like a pirate day. Of course, this is not an event for that. So today's topic is here open source with Python as a case study, I'm assuming. And we have a guest here, Greg, Ishar, and Sammy. So let's start with introduce yourself, guys. So anyone? So Greg, why do you start first?
Okay, cool. Yeah. So I'm Greg. Last year been head of development of NEM Foundation, working mostly in blockchain space, which is a lot of open source. I started coding 95 by age 7 on a Commodore 64, where I was sad actually as an anecdote that I couldn't share the code. And so that opens the door for open source later with a little bit of Django actually in Python development and many more projects the years later. Yeah, glad to be here.
Kage.
Hi, my name is Izhar, also known in the open source community as Kage Senshi. So I'm currently the head of data engineering product development in this company called Abires, doing like some product development on top of Python and things like that. So I've been using Python for about 15 years now. Glad to be here too.
So Sammy.
Hi, I'm Sammy. So I come from Hong Kong and I am a Python developer. In the community, I'm also the founder and president of Open Source Hong Kong. I also founder of Hong Kong Open Source Conference and PyCon. Currently, I'm still the organizer of PyCon Hong Kong. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I know you got. I know a few of you, especially Greg, did introduce a bit the story of how you move open source. But why don't you introduce us a bit deeper how you get started and how you involve in open source? So tell us things like your first patch, your first pull request, etc. So let's start with Greg.
Okay. Yeah. For me, the first open source experience was on the PHP programming language, though not on Python. Yeah. But PHP's been open source for quite so many years. So first experience was there, and then doing freelancer stuff. I worked a lot on private projects as well. But open source gives much more capacity to actually share what you believe in, and sharing knowledge is very important to me, and that's how I slipped into open source. Yeah.
Right. Kage, so how do you actually start? So tell us more.
So I started with open source, I think primarily from the Linux direction. So I got pissed off with the Windows machine at my home, which always came on every time I came back from college. I always had to reformat the machine. So I decided to try out Linux and Fedora. And then that's how I got more into open source. And then from there, the journey goes into Python, goes into advocating open source, goes into various other things related to open source and software engineering in general. Yep.
So how about, do you have patches and all that in the project? In the project involved with? Or other project, do you have merges and all that?
Oh yeah, so in terms of Python contribution, so most of my contribution is primarily bug fixes. I basically just scratching my own itch. So like some bug fixes in clone project, some bug fixes in Fedora where I was using some of their tools, and when I found some traceback, I just try to fix it out. So I also involved in this project called MoPath. That's just yet another Python web framework, more like Zope based minimalist web framework. Basically, mainly in the ideas of Zope, but not exactly Zope based. Yeah.
So Sammy, so tell us about your experience with them.
So when I was a teenager, I'm interested in Unix-like operating systems, and then I learned Linux and found the Linux user group in Hong Kong. So Linux is open source software, and it also bundled with other kinds of open source software, like you have a web server, you have a newsgroup server, you have PHP, Perl, and nowadays we have Python. So you can do many different applications and tasks. So this is how I start with open source. So 20 years ago, I start to work on some web scraping project. So I implement in Perl and then later on in PHP. And 10 years ago, I found that Python can replace Perl in different kinds of applications. And also it's easy to use the regular expression for me to write some web scraper. So this how I switched to Python programming. And I also have my personal GitHub as well, and upload and commit some my open source web scraping projects and also Django app project as well.
Cool. So as a result, how many of you, just a raise of hand, actually had a public repository pre-GitHub? Okay, man, you guys are old. Okay, but GitHub do change a lot of how open source contribution work, isn't it? So, Jojo, what do you think would be the best part of modern day open source contribution compared to last time? Do you think is awesome? So, Greg, what do you think?
I want to say open source is a beautiful way to collaborate. It makes teams, it makes sure for communication between the teams, etc. Now, for myself, my experience, yes, I do a lot of open source, probably 100% of my time, mostly in blockchain projects, so it can be sometimes a little complicated, and you may not know about the project. I'm a member of the PMC of NEM Tech. NEM is a well-known cryptocurrency that's been out there for 4 or 5 years. And so, I have quite a lot of repositories online on GitHub. And I really love open source. I love contributing open source because you're gonna get input from people you didn't even expect to see there. And sometimes it's federated. It's not always in English. Sometimes you have to go and translate it because it's Japanese or something. But this is amazing at open source. It's the variety of people you can be working with. Yeah.
And in the modern day, you have the idea of pull requests, code review, and all that things that never exist in the old days. I think that's really changed a lot compared to last time.
That is really part of how you have to. If you have an open source community you share a code base with, there's going to be a few flows that have to be defined on how do you set up issues, how do you review pull requests, is there any reviewer that are etc. So yeah. Okay,
I will expand on that later. So Kage, what do you think? So what do you involve and what do you think about this source community?
Okay, if you compare GitLab GitHub compared to today, where you have all this new social media platform for code sharing, I think the main thing that have changed quite a bit compared to back then is code discoverability. So you can discover new project more easily. That's one thing. You can discover who are the community that maintain the code base more easily. So, because before GitLab and GitHub exist, whenever you want to find new project, each of these project in their own website and in their own hosting environment, their own mailing list, their own communication channel, their own ticketing system, things get like a bit difficult to maintain to go around. But now that pretty much most everybody is in GitHub and GitLab, so things are a bit easier in that sense. So communication is much easier flowing, and new people can also discover new project more easily. And then also pretty much everybody use Git now. This whole pull request also makes life a bit easier to contribute.
Sammy, so what do you think about question I ask.
GitHub is an excellent marketing page for the open source project. I have I think I have over 20 open source projects on my GitHub, and most of them are Webscaper. And one of my Webscaper project is that it squared the Hong Kong weather data from the Hong Kong Observatory website. And it's very funny that it's a Hong Kong project, but a professor in United States, he committed he made a pull request to me and commit some fix for my project. So it's very funny. So you can collect with other developers over the internet around the world. And why this happens is that you can search what you need on GitHub. So this how the people to get involved this kind of small open source project. Yes.
Yeah, if I may add also another thing about then like how things are today. Creating your own open source project is also easier compared to before. When you want to publish your own project, you have to set up all the infrastructure to support it, all the community to support it, and then it was like a lot of work. So now
sorry for interrupting, but go back to Subversion, creating a project with Subversion and sharing it with the team.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. I mean, not just Subversion and JIT. It's also about what you call it, the ticketing system.
Oh yes,
Control, ticketing system, access control, mailing list. I mean, with GitHub, GitLab, you just have it.
Yeah.
Like before this, you need to set up everything on your own.
Yeah. And before before the GitHub becomes popular, most of open source projects use source form, but it's difficult for you to look at the source code before you download the zip file, the source code table. Yeah. So you can check the source code and find whether it is suitable for your lead, something like that. So this good user interface for the developers.
Cool. So when we talk about practice all day and all day, let's move forward to the future, or present rather. So let's say you want to involve open source right now. So I'm going to give the first scenario here, which is taking existing project. How should you help contributing code for open source project? Any of you guys? Let's start.
Well, there's usually going to be a contributing.md, right? On GitHub, almost every project comes now with this small markdown file describing contributions. Not every project, of course, but it's been GitHub has put in some work on there where you can describe your repositories a little more, and also talk to the community that are going to look at your repository and tell them what they should do to contribute. Now, this also usually a lot of repositories just copy paste. They just take the contributing from the other repo. That's maybe not the best thing, but the fact that it describes is already very useful.
So what, Kage, what you've been doing for a long time?
What was your question again?
How to
help?
How should we start contributing code to open
contributing to an existing project, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, if it's contributing to an existing project, I mean, the one thing to take note, contribution doesn't always have to come in the form of code.
Yeah.
Okay. One is that you can also help contribute a project by promoting it. Like if you use it, you like it, you promote it, that helps. Because the more user uses the project, the higher chance for the project to get some new contributor from this new user base. Another thing you can also contribute, which is also easier, is to document. So I mean, especially a smaller project. I mean, we are all developers. We all hate documentation, am I right? So smaller projects tend to need help in documentation, and if you use a project and you like it, and especially if the project lacks documentation, you can help to create more documentation for that project, like tutorials, so that more people can come in and help in using the software, and also contribute after that, hopefully. And I think then when you go to code level, I would suggest the first thing you should try. I mean, the first thing, of course, you need to be a user of the software. And if you're not a user, it's a bit of, I mean, a bit nonsense for you to contribute. It's a bit difficult for you to contribute to a project that you don't use. So be a user. Then after that, start to take a look at around all their ticketing system. See if there is any bugs that you can help in fixing, or or you can help triage bug, like basically identify whether the bug is valid or not. You can also help around I mean validating whether a new code running or not, like testing. So like they fix some bug or they create a new feature, you can help test. Then eventually, once you start, once you're more comfortable with the community and the code base, then you can perhaps start to develop new feature into the ecosystem. So usually there's a journey that I tend to promote to newer people who want to contribute to open source, because usually it's quite tricky for you to jump straight into code, because there's also the part where, especially in the bigger project, the developers in the project need to trust you also.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Very good
so
point.
start somewhere small. It doesn't have to be to contribute like big code base. You can just even cleaning up code base, whether to follow Pack 8, for example, is already quite a lot of help.
I would want to confirm here that being a user of a software project before you start contributing is very important. Very good point there. Yeah.
So, Sammy, what do you think? What do you think about how should we contribute to our open source project, existing open source project?
So I think that this a good idea to start with a small project. Small project. Even you want to contribute to a big project, you can starting from develop some small tools for the big projects. Yeah. And as a lazy developer, I also hate to write some documentation, but at least just like just like what the Greg said, is that you at least you should put index markdown on your root directory of your open source project, and tells the people what does your project do and how to install and set up and also execute your project. Otherwise, with your project without this kind of introductions, it's very difficult to attract others to use or even contribute your project. It's just like putting your toys to the GitHub, and then it doesn't help to contribute to the open source community.
Okay. And so, so this is something I want to tell the audience. Please ask any question if you have. So if relevant, I will ask it as we go. And also, this is actually to the organizer. You are an open source contributor by doing this conference to promote the language. So that's something to think about. So I'm going to continue the same question, but this time, let's say you have this cool piece of code and you want to share it on your GitHub and whatnot. What should you do? So let's start with Greg. So it's a new idea this time.
I'm gonna just reiterate what we said just now. A lot of developers hate documentation, but the documentation is actually where you get your community. People want to know about your great idea. Your idea can be amazing, and the code can be running fine, but it can still be a mess. It can still be a mess and not maintainable, etc., etc. And so if you are honest with that and you actually put a little bit of time in documentation, you your community may be able to actually jump in right where there is a miss. Where you may know it, right? You may know that you didn't have time to actually refactor this service you have there, and you may have you just write that down in documentation that this is a first draft, and people are very welcome to actually contribute. And then I would also want to say that using platforms like GitHub, Bitbucket, SourceForge, etc., is very important because they actually give you this social kind of feeling about open source. People can see issues, they can see pull requests, they can have labels, they can comment, they can like, they can put all types of emojis on your issues. And so this is very important to actually involve people outside of your own team and try to get them to have a look at the issues. A very good one, GitHub has a label named good first issue, I think. It's a very easy one that everyone recognizes. That's a very good thing to do. Those would be my advices there, yeah.
Okay. Kage, so what do you think? So let's say you want to share your code to GitHub and you want contribution. What's the best way to do it properly?
I mean, it's the general idea, I guess. I agree with Greg. It's documentation first. Especially documentation on how to use the software. Start there first. How to contribute code. You can just have a simple contributing.txt. Just say what's the approval process going to be. But the first thing first is how to use the software, because without a user, without good documentation, you cannot get a user, and without users, you cannot get contributor.
So, so the policy, the contribution policy will be part of the documentation. So, for example, code to be merged must have unit tests. So something like
that. Or even say like some organization, they want to have a clarity on copyright ownership and things like that, or clarity on licensing. But yeah, documentation wise, I mean, project like Django, projects like FOSS, and number of open source project that get adopted very fast tend to have a very good user documentation. Then because developers, they can always go through the code and figure things out, but without users, without they start using things, then they will not start to identify all your error or whatever. So
very good point. Just jumping in again, I didn't really say which kind of documentation you should produce, and I totally agree with Kage. It's the type of documentation that you can use the software after reading it. So
actually, this actually asks the question that I cannot actually add to the screen. What kind of documentation we cover that? Sammy, anything to add on top? Anything to add? It's already covered.
Besides the documentations, GitHub also have the follow mechanism. So when you make every commit or fork, your other followers can see what you did, and it's also a kind of announcement of your project and what is about the update. And also you can announce on your board and social level as well. And the last thing is that you can go to the community meetups and introduce your project. So you can build up your level for the local user group like Python user group or open source, other open source user group as well. Yeah.
I would want to add one more thing actually. In the latest experience working on these blockchain projects, Symbol is a new blockchain. We've been producing open API docs. That's another type of doc that is very, very important. API documentations, they're very easy to produce because there's even tools to automatically produce them, but it's important to actually do them because everyone that's going to integrate with your kind of package, with your software, like Sammy said earlier, you're going to build tools for bigger projects. If you want those tools to actually integrate with your software, you're going to need API documentation.
Okay, cool. So anything to add before I move to the other topic? If not, let's move on. So the thing about open source software is you're free to use whatever platform. I mean, previously it would be different version control software. Thank goodness we don't use CDS anymore, or Subversion. There's a period where Subversion is still as big as GitHub, and Mercurial is smaller, but that exists right nowadays. Thank goodness we have mostly one Git. But despite that, we have a new scenario. So we have GitLab, we have GitHub, and China developer have their own GitHub alternative, Git, for various reasons that shall not say. So now there will be a situation where you have to choose a platform, and that with that kind of openness, do you worry about contribution of the project? So in this case, think about things like does it mean that you have to have fork on 2 different services, etc.? What do you think about this kind of?
For my part, I'm an advocate of distributed, everything that's distributed. So to be honest, Gitty is just another platform that permits to actually host software code. If we are honest to ourselves, GitHub now is owned by Microsoft, and that means that Microsoft owns a lot of the source code of many of the software that is actually running our industry. And so this is very important that we get distribution there as well. Now, I know that the China project is probably not introduced out of need or want to distribute, but the fact that there is one more platform in itself is kind of a good thing. It's kind of a plus. We want more distribution of source code, more distribution of knowledge.
But in practice, though, it means that more management.
In practice, I totally agree. I know this is more done out of censorship than it is done out of distribution of knowledge. Of course, that's kind of the minus of it. But I wanted to go in that in itself, the fact that there is more platforms on which we can share our code is kind of a plus.
Kage, what do you think?
Okay, when it comes to distributed, I mean, Git itself is a distributed version control engine. It is by design is meant to be used in a distributed manner. So having another platform is mainly the matter of the people itself. Like if your contributor coming mainly from China, I mean, then just use put Gitly. But I mean, and if your contributor is mainly using GitHub, then using GitHub. But at the same time, your Git repository, every time you clone it, you're actually cloning the whole thing. You can always set up a different ecosystem inside your office, for example, where your maybe first layer contribution will be from your employees, and then only then you decide to push out to the upstream community. So Git by design is distributed, and I don't see an issue with having a lot of different sites hosting source code. Like take for example, in my case, I had one Opensource project in AWS where our internal developers, we do it inside GitLab because that's free private repos there. Then once a while we push it out to the GitHub repo. Or another way is that when we have developing project inside our client side, where the client require you to set up a separate GitLab instance there, then we just keep on syncing the code base in between. And because when it comes to inside client environment, they want the issue that they file to keep private. I mean, then you have a separate GitLab instance there.
But I'm going to add on top of that. So my bigger concern is less political, more of management, right? As in now you have to sync one more platform. Now you have to sync one more site. So would that be a hassle? That might be the thing actually.
Yeah, but like,
technically, this is not fully true. Like Isha said, it's Git is meant to be distributed. So what Gitty is just another remote. It's just like I add a new remote to my repository. So
Okay, Sammy, what do you think?
I think that open source is an open community. So I think I don't mind that we have a GitHub, GitLab, GitE, people can something like that. It's a different community. When you talk about the GitHub and GitE, GitHub is an international community. It's a global community. You can find that most of the projects is written in English, and the communications are in English. But if you I just check the Git E. If you go to the Git E, even your default language of your web browser is English. It will use the English UI, but when you look at the popular project, most of the popular project, I think most of the project on Git E is written and communicate in Chinese. So so for my personal opinion, this is Chinese community for the open source collaborations within the mainland China. Even in Hong Kong, we will use a GitHub, GitLab. We don't use a Git E. Yeah.
Okay. So, okay, let's move on away from platform. Okay, I'm going to skip the question on Linux. Is there any question online? Documentation, that's the same question. Okay, so the next question I'm going to ask is, okay, so what do you think about support for open source software? So in this case, the question would be something, it was something like, if you pay for open source software, so the first one is, do you pay for your open source software? And the second question is, do you directly compensated for maintaining an open source software? So let's start with Greg.
Yeah, so paying for open source software, yes, of course. There's sometimes packages that you need, that you actually want to be supported. If you're gonna run a SaaS website and you're running it with Django, let's say, and there's packages for Django that are also paid, right? And or you want to support the maintainer and tell him that he works every month because you want it, etc. So yeah, definitely pay for open source software. And about the sustainability of open source, I have to confirm that in the beginning it can be hard. It can be a little bit more complicated because you share everything free, but that's also a misconception. That's also a misconception because by sharing your knowledge, you actually open yourself to people. You're not closing yourself. So if you open yourself to people and you actually find people that are going to believe, that are going to want to contribute with you, or they want to support and maintain your project because the project is of big importance. Take again the example of Sammy to create tools for bigger projects. If your tool turns out to be a very important tool for the developer community, well, I'm pretty sure you're going to get supported for that. In terms of sustainability, it doesn't always pay all the bills, and you probably want to do some kind of productization if you really want to sustain fully out of open source. But I know a lot of projects, in fact, Symbol and NEM, everything's open source, and there's two big companies actually making money out of these open source products, and we're still working on others. And so, yeah, there's definitely room for sustainability with open source as well. I don't know, what do you others think?
Yeah, Kage. So.
Okay, when it comes to paying for open source, I mean, we do. I mean, in fact, the company I work with, we are primarily an open source service provider, mainly on infrastructure and also some software development. So when it comes to open source and money, people need always to remember that while the source code is free, while the software is free, the manpower and time is not. Say if you need consulting on how to use the software, you need consulting how to deploy the software, you need some services to do it, or you need support when there's something goes wrong, somebody to help you out. That's where we pay for things. Say we pay Red Hat for support, or we pay Cloudera for support, things like that. In fact, that's how a lot of enterprises consume open source software, because enterprise doesn't really care whether you are doing open source software or doing proprietary software. What important for them is that there is always somebody to help deploy, to help consult, to help support. If the software doesn't have this thing, no matter how popular the open source software is, they will want to avoid to use it, because this that's where usually also we go to our clients, and that's what the client pay us for. Like sometimes the client want to use, say, there was some project. What's that project? Let's just
It's
say,
proprietary. You don't
let's
have
just
to
say,
give specific.
let's just say Flask. There's request for training. People who know Flask, I mean, they want some training. This client wants some training, asking anybody know Flask. So we go in, we do training on that. That's still good, decent amount of money you can get there. Or even say PostgreSQL, where I mean, in our case, our company have some experts in that. They have performance issues. They know how to do it. They don't know how to cluster PostgreSQL. Even though they follow all the documentation online, they don't know how to do it, and they need somebody who really know how to do it to come in. Yeah, that's why we come in lah. So to answer your question, do I pay for open source? Yes, depending if I need the support or not. And at the same time, I still pay people to develop fixes if needed, and get paid for open source. Yeah, that's definitely because that's all of the business that we're doing. Yep.
Okay. So Sammy, how about you?
For the for the pain of contributing open source project, it's difficult to convert your initial efforts and manpower to an open source project. But with your project is useful for other user, at least you can earn some money to pay for your coffee. Like you can provide this commercial support, or you can provide a hosting service for your project. So it's a different type of business model. When you take your first step to commit your open source project to the public repository like GitHub, so it's a kind of internet marketing for your project, for your effort. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to move on from this question. I have something just now, but I forgot the question. Okay, so something I forgot to ask that I should ask earlier. What is your favorite software license? And it's actually relevant to the question before this. So, Greg, let's start. If you start a software project, open source project, what license would you go for and why?
Can depend on the project. I've favorite would be Apache 2.0 or MIT. Why? Because it's very important to share knowledge and to share knowledge with the world, but keep track of who initiated which idea, whom do they belong to, whom can I go back at discussing the future, etc. I've been using also some BSD licenses in some more academic projects, like a very technical cryptography library that I had to publish. Well, it was using some BSD3 license packages, and BSD3 implies that you also use BSD3 if you use the package. And so it can become a little complicated. It's still open source. It's a little bit more restrictive on how you actually can share the package. My favorite would be Apache to answer your question. Apache 2.0. Okay. Glad to hear all of it.
Okay, got it.
Okay, for me, in general, I have a rule. Like if it's a library that is not a complete software, then my favorite will be MIT or Apache. Because libraries to me doesn't carry business process. It doesn't really help an organization easily. So you still need to code something on top of that library. So I always go for more promising license for library level, or even like small components, small services. They'll go for on MIT or Apache. But when it comes to complete software, a software that on its own, when you install, you already get like a complete software that you can help your business and whatsoever. In that case, my favorite will be GPL or Afro GPL. Reason would be is that especially the more complete software, you don't want people to turn it into open source. I mean, I'm a firm believer in free software, so I don't want to have somebody take an open source software and turn it into a closed source software, especially if it's a very complete software. Because if you take a complete software, then I will expect you to respect that the developer has spent so much time in building the software, and they want to release it open source, and it's okay for the developer to release it as GPL, because GPL to me is also enforces other organizations that take that software, if they modify it to a certain degree, it will be enforced to share back the code. That's in the way that's your payment to the software. But also another thing I like about GPL and Afro GPL, in a situation where you have a complete software and an organization want to take that software, this assuming that you own the source code completely, copyright. So if there's another company want to take your GPL or AGPL software or middleware, and they don't want to release the product that was based on as open source, then there is an opportunity for you to monetize, because you can do something like MySQL where you can sell them a separate license. But of course, this is assuming that you own completely of that code base, or that code base is using mostly MIT Apache libraries, and your software is GPL. Then you can use that as an opportunity to monetize.
Okay. If I move to Sammy, have you actually test whether people are actually enforcing GPLs and other open source license before?
Uh,
No,
I-
not to Sammy. I mean, this to Kage. Because it's saying that
Go ahead,
using...
go ahead, Sammy. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Sammy.
yeah.
He wanted to answer.
So can you repeat the question?
Have you
Yeah.
have you test whether the license is enforced down here?
That one not tested lah.
Okay. Never mind. I just want to know. This extra question. So Sammy, let's go on. Let's answer the previous question. What your favorite license and why?
10 years ago, my favorite license was GPL, but nowadays my favorite license is Apache public license, because I would like to pick a permissive license rather than copyleft nowadays, because I would like other developers to don't concern whether they should open source or not. And I picked the Apache license instead of MIT. Is that Apache license comes with some restriction, like the license does not grant the permissions to use the chain mask, surface mask, something like that. Yeah.
Cool. So you guys are mostly an Apache license.
Yeah.
You will use that one. Interesting.
Apache came in a few years ago and it ruled open source. I don't know. A lot of people went from GPL to Apache, but then again, I totally agree with Kage that sometimes makes more sense to go with GPL. That can be very project related. Yeah.
Yeah, Apache to me is the reason why it goes Apache and all these permission licenses become very popular is because a lot of companies, especially proprietary companies like Google, Google, Facebook, and whatnot, they are only releasing libraries. They're not releasing their full software. They're not releasing the full code base of
Very good point.
Facebook. And a lot of open source projects out there are frameworks, libraries, or even middlewares. They are not a complete business software. But if it's a business software, I tend to want to use GPL also as a form of trying to as a way to make people either contribute back, or if they don't want to contribute back, buy a separate license from the company.
We actually have a question from the
so
audience.
Greg, you want to add something?
Yeah, we have a question from the audience about licenses, and I think it would be good to answer.
Okay, so the question from second on YouTube is, should simple code for academic and study purposes also be licensed? If the code are posted on the internet, anybody can see. So what do you all think? Let's start with Greg.
This is a good question, because as Kage mentioned earlier, licenses only really matter if you own the code. And that is going to depend on whether you're academic. If you own the code, definitely go ahead and license it, because that's gonna clarify the copyright about software. That's really it, and it's very, very important. Also for study project, I started with a PacNEM game. I think the first thing that I ever licensed was a Apache 2.0 remake of PacNEM for the browser. So anything can be, and I would suggest you license. Yeah.
Kage.
Yeah, definitely you have to license, but of course, different country have different copyright laws. But in general, when you wrote a code base, you own it, and when you own it, when you want to give other people access to the software, it is good for you to spell out what they can and cannot do with the software. So that's why license. That's the purpose of license, to spell out what they can or cannot do with the software. But of course, it really depends on the level of complexity of your software. Is sometimes it's just simple libraries that I think anybody can rewrite it easily. Then it doesn't matter, because I think to me that's close to public domain already. But something that is a bit more complex, definitely you have to license. Then they'll be clear for how people should use it, or whether they should credit back to you. And this whole credit thing, everything is also part. If you want to monetize your as a service or something, it's quite important also there.
Okay. Same.
Yeah.
I think it's important to add a license to your coding and also any kind of your creative as well. Not just only for the coding, because when you put something on the internet, it's very easy for the other people to redistribute your creations. So it's a very good idea to tell others that you are permitted to redistribute my creations to the other, to share my creations with other people. Yeah. Even this, when we develop some codings, it's very common. We use any kind of open source license. When you write something like an article, some pictures, you can use a Creative Commons license as well. Yeah.
Second, I hope that answered your question, and also take your academic study code seriously, because there is a big software project that started from small code base that is for research. So a good example is the Apache web server. It's actually a source code on a magazine, and that is a big project. And Apache server is called Apache server because it's a patch T server, because there's a lot of patch. So something to think about. So I hope that's answer your question. So now let's go to license. I know some of you actually develop for proprietary software. That's the variety of software development. Have the license actually have the fact that the license or the fact that it's open source at all actually hinder your use of open source software in this kind of project? It's fine if you actually build only open source software, so then that's fine.
It depends.
Okay.
It really depends.
Okay.
I can tell of an anecdote. We're in a Python panel here, but
Yeah.
in JavaScript, there's this anecdote of one guy that pushed out a job offer on the NPM info, and so it can hinder your project. Indeed, people could be doing very malicious things, but developers are usually assisted by good tools like NPM, etc., that have a lot of verifications, cryptographical verifications under the hood that you don't know about, but because you have linked your GitHub account, you actually are pretty sure that you download the verified version of the package, etc. Yeah, it can hinder, but it is not always, it doesn't happen that often that open source would be a problem for your software. Now, if you're using projects that are unmaintained, libraries, for example, that are unsupported, this definitely can have an influence on what you can produce, because maybe the integration is buggy or something. Sorry, go ahead.
But I'm going to argue that the fact that that project is visible is a feature, because in the commercial world, that project are there, meaning there's no way to integrate. Whereas open source project is there, it's just unmaintained, meaning you can update it.
On the technical side, though, whether it's commercial or it's open source, is not going to change. Is not going to change the quality for sure. Everything. The only thing that changes there is that a commercial product comes with support, where a open source project usually is going to come open. You can use it. That's it. I don't do anything more. But
and you support yourself.
But then again, we know that commercial projects usually are gonna have a lot more quality because it's a full enterprise behind it. But it's not for sure. Yeah.
So Kage Senshi, sorry, Nagi is actually asking about licensing. It's the same question asking, have any of you guys working on closed source project and open source project combined, and how's that turn out? So
maybe one other Kage or something.
Okay. Going back to the original question, where does open source hinder proprietary? One thing is that I don't develop proprietary software. Maybe it's a personal philosophy thing. But when it comes to integration with the closed source software, a lot of open source licenses only cover the software itself. So you can always make a REST API to it, and your proprietary code just call the REST API. Then there will be no integration issue there. So yeah, then you make the REST API open source because maybe because it's GPL or something. Depends lah. So using open source and proprietaries together is mainly an engineering problem. There's a lot of ways you can get around that lah. Like a lot of open source middlewares out there, the proprietary code just call the API through REST. Yeah. So
that's really the magic trick. That's how they do it all. They call their APIs using their proprietary code.
Yeah. So that's just how it is. And then going to what Greg mentioned about an existing code base is no longer maintained. To me, that on that part is in open source. Generally, software doesn't come with any support, any warranty. You are the one you are the maintainer. If you take the code base, you are the maintainer. Of course, sometimes the upstream community is dead. But if the upstream community is dead, then you are responsible for the source code if you're using your product. So the fixes should come from you. Yeah.
Okay. Sammy, what do you think about the original question and the extra question that Nagi asked? You're muted.
In short, I think that you can things like Android. Yeah. Android is actually combined with open source Android and also the proprietary path from the Google. So you may think how they are engineering together and then combine together into one Android mobile phone product. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
I want to add maybe to the question again, to the question of the audience. There's another way with DLLs from Windows and shared library packages on Linux systems. Depending on how you're going to bundle your package, you can actually make use of closed source software. It depends on how you are going to distribute it. If you distribute it as a shared library that no one can see the code of, well, it's fine. It's okay if it uses some kind of closed source stuff. But yeah, so it really very important, very interesting question there. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to add my own on this. I'm not I'm going to add. So Nagi.
Swimming, I cannot hear you.
Same here.
Check your.
We can't hear you.
We can't hear you, Swimming. He disappeared.
Bit of a lag, yeah. He didn't have lags earlier. Not sure if he's still there.
All right, I'm back.
You sure you're back?
I'm not. That's interesting. It's the first time on a panel my panelist will not be there anymore. That can only happen. Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah.
Okay. It seems to coming back.
Yeah. So any questions from the other audience, you can post in the comments as well. Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything? Okay. So.
Okay, you just came back.
Too bad.
You just came back.
Okay. Okay.
So repeat whatever question you
We're a
want to
bit
ask.
short of times. A bit short of time. So let's start with what's the exciting open source project you all look forward to. So the rules here must be open source and all that. Then I will go through second question. So most exciting project, open source project you're looking forward to, and actually here's the more important question. Most interesting open source question and trend. These are the two things I want to hope to get from you guys. Greg.
Yeah, most important project I'm looking forward to is very easy for me. I'm working on a new blockchain project called Symbol. It's the next generation blockchain from NEM. It's cryptocurrency, it's blockchain, it's a little bit complicated. I'm not going to make any too many technical announcement about that, but it's 100% open source. And actually open source and Bitcoin and blockchain is a very valuable asset of those softwares. The fact that they are open source opens up distribution. The fact that they are open source makes it possible for everyone to run their own node. But I'm going to cut short. I think I answered your question. I'm going to go over to Kage. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, do you think this is more of a shameless plug? But anyway, so main one will be, if you guys ever heard of this framework called MorePath, take a look at that. If you like plugin based framework that allow you to build component architecture kind of software, take a look at that MorePath project. And then also currently I'm working on another framework on top of it, which is closer to a meta CMS called Mock Framework. And that one also is something that I'm looking forward to trying to release it properly sometime end of the year or sometime middle of next year, because the documentation is just missing there. Trend-wise, I'm seeing that in Malaysia, Python is starting to get quite a bit of traction, especially in the data science ecosystem and data engineering ecosystem. But what I'm truly looking forward for out of this trend in Malaysia is that data science and data engineering will be the entry point of a lot of new developers coming into Python ecosystem, and hopefully from there they'll discover a lot of more things that they will be they're able to do on Python, and then we can get more supply of Python programmers in Malaysia for other purposes such as web development or even general system software and whatnot. Yeah.
Semi.
My interest is on the data and data science and the also the web scraping as well. I want to go the open data sets and share the data on the internet. I'm very interested to looking for any project about the web scraping and also encourage more developers to contribute to the data science and also web scraping as well.
Okay.
We have another question. We have a question from the audience. Maybe the last minute. I know it's the last minute.
That's the last one. Here's the last one question. How do you deal with criticism and try to contribute, and how do you get over the feeling? Great. Let's make this quick.
Contribute more. If someone doesn't accept or want to criticize you, I think criticism is very good. Good feedback can be very building up your skills actually. So if someone is going to point you at a little bit of a mistake you did, usually it's going to be to improve you and accept it usually, and that's what I can say, and contribute more. You have to find the trust. I think Kage mentioned it earlier. You have to find the trust of the contributors that you are helping. There's a little bit of trust to have there. I think someone mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, sometimes the core developers of the project are just being asshole because they want good code to come in. But let's not make that discourage you from contributing to the project unless that the person really being really bad. So yeah, criticism is fine as long as it's not too bad or or positive criticism. But when it comes to toxic people, then that one, you just ignore them. Don't even pay attention to them. Don't feed the troll.
Exactly.
Yeah, and my friend does in this world, someone like you and someone hate you. So just forget it. Actually, the last thing you can do that you can force the project with you would like to contribute. Yeah, this the last action you can take. Yeah. Oh.
So Suleiman disappeared again.
So yeah, our moderator is gone. Oh, he's back.
Also, you answer now the question asked. I'm going to ask the community to share your contact and all that. I think the community need I think our assistant need to format the link that I paste, and I can't comment in public. So I think thanks for all the input. So thanks for listening. If you have any question, I hope the community will actually share the contact to the guys here. So yeah, thanks for listening.
Amazing. Amazing panel, yeah. Thanks guys, thanks everyone.
Thanks guys.
Thanks, bye-bye.
Yes. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So
Bye-bye.
how do we get up?
I don't know.
Yes,
I guess maybe they're giving us a few more minutes. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yes. Anything? So what should we do next? Hello.
I don't know.
I'm going to hide myself there.